Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's presentation as part of the Industry Insight webinar series. The topic this time is private cloud computing for lawyers, and speaking today will be Tomas Souros from Abacus. As Chief Solutions Architect at Abacus Law with Abacus Data Systems, Tomas Souros applies his technical, legal, and business acumen to define business requirements and achieve cloud-based practice automation for his clients. As the spearhead of global sales engineering team, and while working daily with Abacus's client-centric sales teams, he defines business, technology, financial security, and usability solutions for Abacus private cloud, mobile, and legal practice area-specific platforms. Mr. Souros earned a BA at Tufts University and a JD at the University of California Hastings College of the Law, and is a member of the State Bar of California. The Industry Insight webinar series is hosted by the ABA Legal Technology Resource Center. To stay updated on upcoming webinars or view previous videos, visit ambar.org/industryinsight. You can also stay updated on legal technology news through our blog, lawtechnologytoday.org. Thank you all for joining us today, and we'll now begin the webinar.
Hi everyone, this is Tomas. I appreciate your attention and attendance today. My goal as an attorney who has worked for a technology company that specializes in implementing private clouds for our clients of all types in all different types of locations with different practice areas and specific needs. I've learned a lot during that process. The last 3 years have shown tremendous growth, and I think the next 3, 5 will show even more. We'll touch on that more specifically later in the presentation, but that's kind of my background. And going forward, I think the first step I'd like to do is basically kind of establish a foundation of understanding, because the term cloud has been used in many different ways, and at this point it's diluted to a certain extent, because cloud, at its core, refers to the network of remote internet-based servers to process, store, and manage data. So that's a pretty general description. In many ways, you can actually use that same description to describe the internet as a whole. But what cloud, the real advantages of cloud, and why so many firms and even businesses across the world are moving into the cloud, is for a number of different kind of very concrete reasons. But I want to establish, one, the definition for it. So in essence, it's kind of remotely hosted and managed data with various other services potentially being bundled within that. And the services, I think, actually kind of call out the first distinction I want to make, which is really the difference between the public cloud, which a lot of you are familiar with, kind of Amazon Web Services or Microsoft Azure or Dropbox or even Google Apps, those kind of things, where it's shared resources. It's really distributed across the globe. The data itself is distributed across a network of data centers. And then also one of the kind of advantages or the understandings of the public cloud is deployment. You can literally call Amazon and be up and running and and have your Etsy store available online very quickly. So that's really the concept of the public cloud. And I wanted to distinguish that from what I'm focusing on today, and which Abacus kind of specializes in, and that's the private cloud. And in the legal industry, the private cloud has some advantages, some distinct advantages. One is 24/7 management. So the vendor that you choose to kind of trust and have supply your private cloud or create and implement it, manages that environment 24/7, makes sure that the security and compliance requirements are built into that environment, and offers kind of redundant dedicated environments, or redundant backups, I should say, of your dedicated environment. The real difference is public cloud means it's kind of shared resources. Oftentimes that's a great way for any type of organization to move to the cloud. The private cloud offers services bundled with that, including a higher level of security, access controls, permissions, and the management, which really is the differentiator. So you know who to call for support and how to scale up and how to make sure that any kind of logs that you may need or changes that happen in your organization, everything from kind of restoring a backup to making sure that a new staff member has exactly the tools they need. That is where private cloud and your kind of secure, dedicated environment is a preliminary or foundational distinguishing aspect between those different types of clouds. And then last, I wanted to kind of touch on, I realize this is kind of arcane, but there are a lot of acronyms that are used to describe the different types of clouds. One you may have heard is the SaaS or SaaS. That's software as a service. Next, you have desktop as a service. You also have IT, which is the entire kind of IT infrastructure as a service, and finally platform as a service, which really has to do more with development than in specifics of the cloud. But I think for public and private, if you have that as your initial kind of distinction, and then software as a service, where via a web browser, for instance, you're able to access a suite of tools that are specific, and secured and based on your account. That's one kind of paradigm. The other paradigm is desktop as a service, and many private cloud vendors have selected desktop as a service because the accessibility, consistency, and permissions and security can be managed for clients in a private cloud environment, where the desktop is really your work computer, even though it's a virtual environment, that's at your beck and call, regardless of what device you're using or where you happen to be geographically. So those are kind of the distinctions I would make, at least preliminarily. So as as I move forward through this presentation, we're kind of starting from a common understanding of terms and distinctions between them. And then, of course, the core advantages of the cloud and the real why behind it is risk management, elevated security, data ownership, and even control of those environments, regardless of where you happen to be, and at multiple locations physically, remote staff that can be dialed up as needed. Those are really the advantages, where the scalability of this environment far exceeds, and actually the security as well, what is oftentimes resource intensive. And for an organization to have similar or identical accessibility and controls in a on-premise solution, the resource cost oftentimes far exceeds what can be created in a cloud environment. So those are some of the core advantages, and I hope we now have kind of a good vernacular or at least an understanding of how we can distinguish between some of the clouds. So I use this infographic oftentimes to just give a visual understanding. Sometimes we have different visual learners or readers, but this is one we use where if you look at this infographic on the right-hand side of things, it's really the private cloud that can be created for a firm or any attorney, regardless of the practice area. In the core of it is your virtual desktop. That is all of the tools that you need to communicate and collaborate and perform, represent your clients in the best way possible. Within that environment, you can install literally any Windows program, and then behind the scenes, the vendor, our teams are managing your documents on kind of high volume arrays of storage disks that have 5 different layers of real-time kind of backup. So it's not just, oh, we have a backup of our data in the cloud. Instead, at any given time, you literally have 5 layers of those backups. And then a different way of kind of optimizing the environment is to break out kind of the applications that you will run on their own, kind of database servers. And not to get too technical, but the whole concept of this is that behind the scenes, you have high volume storage, you have access, and you have high performance, right? So when you access your environment, there's not a lag, or there's not that kind of delay between when you click an action and then it's performed. So the private cloud, especially using kind of modern hardware and kind of the ubiquitous broadband internet that's available now, really gives you an experience where you don't feel like you're remote controlling a machine that's slowly kind of registering your actions. One of the kind of frustrating things I hear from a lot with using kind of remote control for a machine is even just typing, and how it lags behind by a few words or whatever, and you have to wait for it to catch up and then move back to maybe fix a typo. I mean, that's like a real world example of how the modern private cloud environments have done away with that, so that the performance is on par with you connecting and running the same exact program. Let's say it's Word or Outlook or a case management software on a device locally versus in your virtual desktop in the cloud. The performance is similar, with the advantage being that virtual desktop is yours, to summon or connect to using whatever device, Mac, Windows, Chromebook, whatever tablet, smartphone. The device becomes, or the environment becomes agnostic, both from a software kind of OS operating system level and a device. So I can move from my Windows machine at my desk at work. I can be working on a document, close that connection, go home, have dinner with the family, put the kids down, reconnect. That document is waiting for me in exactly the same position, and I'm using the exact same tools. So there are advantages there, and that's where that virtual desktop becomes, or the access to it becomes so important. So that's kind of the far right here. If we move to the center, that's where kind of the hardware and the future proofing that a private cloud gives a law firm where the firewall and intrusion detection and the security access layer, where on a user-by-user basis, you're able to grant or restrict access to that individual's virtual desktop. The advantage being within the same organization, I log in with my credentials, others log in with theirs, and we each have the access we need, the tools we need, but in a very, in a very kind of comprehensive way, the firm can also manage what those individuals can and cannot have access to. So that access layer becomes extremely important. Should someone leave or go on, maternity leave, for instance, that level of control enables the firm to be able to kind of adjust each individual's desktop for coverage in a way that is much more straightforward in a private cloud environment where things are virtual, so the changes can be made so that the next time you log into that virtual desktop, those changes are reflected and available. Then, of course, the concept of data centers. So instead of a firm spending the capital expenses to buy hardware, update hardware, manage hardware, fix hardware over time, instead, the private cloud becomes a dedicated environment within, and in our Abacus private cloud, we have 3 data centers that kind of mirror each other. So the firm's private cloud is not just in one location or installed in one bit of hardware. Instead, it's mirrored and it's even geographically redundant. And those data centers, all data centers now, and some of them more than others, are in essence kind of bunkers where the level of control, both in a security standpoint, but also fire suppression and multiple redundant power supplies, all of that gives the kind of stability that enable private cloud providers to guarantee 99.99% uptime, which equates to, I think, 5 minutes of maintenance downtime kind of predicted on an annual basis. So when you think about it and you compare, it starts to kind of change or right the balance, I would say, between what is the concept that if I have proximity to the machines that house our data, there's a confidence level there. When you really start to compare the two, it's a fallacy to think that an on-prem single server with maybe some cloud backup of data is truly as robust as a private cloud can offer. So that's one of the things that I engage with my clients all the time. I understand that there's a comfort level in being close to the devices and the data, but the private cloud, and it's been recognized by the ABA, has really been identified as the future for law firms, certainly, and businesses in general, including General Electric and a lot of the very large Fortune 500 companies that have seen a cloud environment as the future of kind of computing and data management and access controls and things like that. And then finally, on the far left is the real advantages to you as an attorney who's using the cloud. You can be at your desk at the office. You can be in the conference room like I am now. You can be off-site. You can be at home, at court, traveling. When you connect, using whatever device you have handy or you prefer to use at that point, through the internet, you pull up your virtual desktop that's consistent and has all the tools, all the information that you need to perform or to represent your clients in the best way possible. So this graphic kind of gives you a very specific view of the Abacus private cloud, but at its core, this is what the private cloud really brings to the table, and it's a way for us to kind of have not only maybe language that we share, but also kind of an understanding of the architecture and how things are established and designed behind the scenes. So some other things I think I enjoy data and statistics. What's important to understand about cloud adoption. So in 2015, there were 51% of firms that embraced the cloud. That term "embrace" kind of strikes me as a little vague, but I think what's maybe more relevant is there was a 3 times growth between 2011 and 2015. So in 4 or 5 years, adoption of the cloud is on that level, and that's as I mentioned earlier in the beginning of this conversation. I see that continuing in a meaningful way, where risk-averse individuals don't want to be early adopters necessarily, but there has been enough of a move, and you'll compare that to 69% of non-legal businesses that were maybe earlier adopters, because if you have a distributed workforce, or you need to scale quickly, or you simply don't have the resources, the capital expenditures that maybe take 5 years to deduct or something like that, instead you can shift a lot of those costs to operating expenses when you move to a private cloud and rely on a vendor to supply the hardware and services and support. And of course, the main benefits that are kind of driving that level or that increase in adoption are accessibility, obviously, scalability, which is the way to be flexible and grow quickly, and then of course economic benefits, which include the fact that by joining a private cloud, you benefit from enterprise-level cybersecurity and the 24/7 maintenance of that, which I like to describe as the difference between proactive maintenance of an environment, meaning it's being monitored 24/7 so that anything that comes up will be identified, if not immediately, very quickly and can be resolved, versus having reactive, IT management, where if something breaks, then you maybe bring somebody in, you diagnose it, and you resolve it. But that immediately leads to disruptions and downtime. So that enterprise level, both on a security standpoint and a maintenance level, is extremely important, and also compliance. Understanding that you're going with a vendor who is in the business of supplying environments that comply with HIPAA and high-tech acts, and even FedRAMP if you're working with government agencies in any capacity. So the compliance, the security, scalability, the economic benefits, and accessibility. That's really what's driving adoption across the legal industry. Now, what I hear from a lot of my clients is, how do I even know? How do I perform my due diligence? So I know when I'm selecting a provider, not only do I know what services I'm getting, but I can rest easy. I have the peace of mind knowing that I've done my research and I've made a wise decision. So to that kind of question or that topic, the bar, right, has I guess I should say state bars across the United States have issued a number of different ethical or ethics opinions. And to date, no state bar has said no as far as whether you can ethically represent your clients and manage your firm in a private cloud. So not a single state has said no. 20 have explicitly said yes, that you can. Arizona is kind of on the forefront, having either earlier this year or late last year said that within 2 years, they expect most firms, if not all firms, to be in a cloud environment, because the benefits are so obvious. But the Bar Association, I want to read this because I think this is important. So as a whole, the ethical kind of opinion is that if attorneys at firms take reasonable efforts to prevent the inadvertent or unauthorized disclosure of or unauthorized access to information leading to the representation of a client, right? If you take those reasonable efforts, then you have fulfilled your ethical obligation and you can move into the cloud. Right, so what are some of the things that involve reasonable efforts? So some of the things that I advise is ask your vendor that you're kind of vetting for their certification. Are they SOC 1, SOC 2, and even SOC 3 compliant? Are they SSAE 16 certified? So those are acronyms, right? But those are the highest level of certifications available to data centers within the industry. So you need to know, and then those are even kind of certifications that you can ask to view, for further confirmation. Also, look to the service level agreements, the guarantees of uptime. I mentioned earlier that 99.999% of time, you want those types of guarantees because the vendor becomes who you rely on, right? So look at the service level agreements. Truly pore over the terms, and conditions of those agreements. Terms of service and so on, and also a vendor that has experience with the legal industry and knows the compliance and the regulations and kind of the standards is always an advantage. So those are kind of core questions to ask. Also, something extremely important, and this also goes into those agreements that you'll sign. Make sure that your cloud vendor, your provider, is explicit in outlining data ownership and the retention policy. And retention can also be thought of as, destruction policy. How often, when, and under what circumstances would they delete? Or in what context do they also store information? Because, the firm should have a set policy as far as how long you're storing, how long you're maintaining documents, and then what happens after they've been deleted, to making sure that the firm does have the information they need, and following your kind of, your data deletion policy, make sure that it's complete. And then ownership of data. Is it in the United States? When do you have access to it? How complete is your access to it and control of it? So those are extremely important things to make sure that are spelled out in those agreements. Also, third-party access. You may want to have, client portals and things like that where you're sharing information. or even kind of a vendor that's working with you or co-counsel, something like that. And also, as I mentioned earlier, that access layer, user-level permissions that truly give you on a granular level the ability to grant or restrict access to staff as well as third parties. And then finally, encryption. Encryption is becoming more and more important. And there are two aspects of it that I always kind of advise my clients to look into. And it's the concept of data encrypted in transit. And that means when you send and receive information to the cloud. And then data at rest. And that is data that resides. So when you create a document or upload a document, it's then preserved, stored, and managed in that environment, that private cloud. But that is considered at rest. And you want encryption in both of these scenarios, in transit and at rest. By doing that, not only do you maintain compliance, but if something happens where there's an exploit or anybody has access to it, that's another layer where that encryption will protect you. So data that is encrypted is not as, clearly it's not machine readable, or it's not, readable by individuals. But those are the kind of core, topics and questions that I always urge my clients to perform in order to make sure that they've used reasonable efforts and performed their due diligence. Okay. And then moving on, some of the concerns that are regularly expressed, security, right, is a big concept where I touched on that kind of fallacy, or at least the idea that I think as a fallacy, that being close, proximity to the machine or the hard drive that has your data is the equivalent of security. And I'll touch on some kind of scenarios later or use cases. And then the other one are kind of the biggest threats, and they're unauthorized access, account hacking, and insecure interfaces, right? And all of that, I understand that is core to any type of environment that's storing confidential and important data for clients. But when you look at these concerns, I think of them as better handled in the cloud, right? Because similar to storing that information on site, I don't know if many of you have heard of, but phishing is becoming more and more prevalent, and it's actually being focused towards law firms because they understand confidential health information, financial information, just personal information as period, for clients has value. Protecting it is your duty and responsibility, but exposing it is something that can be used as a leverage point. So, what I tell a lot of my clients is, and one thing that comes up recently is the Panama Papers, the kind of Ramon Fonseca firm in Panama. That was actually an outside hack, which happens, rarely these days. But 1 terabyte, which is a significant amount of information, was siphoned from that firm over multiple years. And then it kind of exposed to the internet with a lot of embarrassment, not only embarrassment, but criminal charges and things like that being the result. So just as there are concerns about data stored in the cloud, there should also be concerns about data stored on premise. That those are just kind of natural, security concerns. The advantage, and I'll go back to kind of the private cloud, is if you have somebody that's constantly 24/7 monitoring, activity and being flagged using kind of security profiles, where if there's any activity like that siphoning, over time that siphoning would have shown up as, one user, quote unquote, performing that action. That would have caused, our security team to reach out to the firm and say, hey, is this something that you mean to have happen? Instead, the Panama Papers case was, it happened at such kind of a low level siphon over time that they didn't notice it because it didn't, exhaust bandwidth, and it certainly didn't, disrupt any other kind of function. So, the cloud concerns are equally, expressed on-prem, and I think, many of the aspects and the designs of cloud, security and the management of those environments almost naturally help you or put you in a better position to protect against exploits. And then I'm going to speed up a little bit. Some common misconceptions that I hear, that proximity is security. I touched on that earlier, the idea that that network or that server on site is howling away and protecting your information. In fact, the hardware itself is not at the level that's available through a private cloud, so that's something to think about. All hardware is the same. I would say that's a fallacy as well. The server that you spend $15,000 to get from Dell is an exceptional bit of hardware, but it certainly is not the same that's built into the data center. We build our servers from the metal up, and we build into them the backups and redundancy and the ability to that 99.99% uptime, which is proactively monitored. I'm kind of building on the things I mentioned earlier. And also I want to kind of identify that a cloud, oh yeah, we back up our data in the cloud, is not the same as being back in business. So you could imagine if there's like a catastrophic, event or something like that, where restoring the data backup, you certainly have access to that data, the documents and things like that you may need, but getting each workstation and making sure that your actual business, all your staff and all your attorneys are literally back using all the tools that they had available to them, that is only available or is easily available within a private cloud environment. And some other things, the no internet means no cloud, that is becoming less and less of a concern, specifically because, broadband is available, and even the kind of the connection speed, depending on where you are and what device you're using, can be tailored. So internet of any type, including using your phone as a hotspot or having, a little device that gives you 4G connection that you can kind of plug in with a USB, those are available now, so that internet does not just mean a cable that comes into the office. Instead, it's wireless, it's cell-based. There are a lot of ways to basically make sure that your internet connection will always be available. And finally, there's the misconception that it's expensive. I compare that sometimes to making a selection between an insurance provider or even a doctor. If you're making a critical and important decision like that, is the true cost? Is it $15 per month, that difference? Is that really going to mean that you're going to go to one doctor versus another? No. I think you do your due diligence, and what the expense is can easily be attached to the value received, and you can also shift capital expenses to operating expenses. So in many ways, moving to the cloud can be cost effective, where also from a hardware perspective, the devices you use no longer need the very latest processor or something like that. You can use equipment that you choose to use in a meaningful way. Okay. And then this is kind of the crux of it. So the cloud advantages. Zero capital investment, right? It's an operating cost. That's a huge change. You can immediately deduct that. Access to and ownership of data. That means wherever you are, you have control, and you have a vendor that helps you, manage that access, and then of course provide full ownership to you. It simplifies in many aspects the IT burden, because you don't need to update hardware or rely on a third party who comes in and tells you that you need X, Y, and Z. Instead, you have an environment that you can scale up as needed. Disaster recovery and business continuity are extremely important. Imagine if there was a fire or some sort of tornado or catastrophe. It's not something that you expect to happen all the time, but what would be your policy? How would you recover from that? With a cloud, you could imagine your staff could go to the next county. If they have an internet-connected computer, they're right back up with their desktop. So that concept of disaster recovery and kind of its co-partner business continuity. How long would it take your firm to be back up and running should your actual location, your office, be compromised or destroyed, let's say, not to be gloom and doom about it. So the backups are clear. The 24/7 monitoring and maintenance are extremely important. And then a couple of things that maybe I'll touch on finally. Hardware can fail, falter, or simply disappear. I had a client where the kind of adversarial or not so happy breakup of a firm, someone literally backed up a pickup and removed their server and drove off. So hardware, as much as you kind of rely on it and think that it being on site makes it safe, it can be stolen, damaged, or fail, right? It happens. Also, the fire, floods, tornadoes, the acts of God that, no one really anticipates, but the same reason that we have insurance, should lead you to the fact that, how much can you rely on-site devices and hardware? And with the private cloud, all of that really resides in a data center that is not immune from fire, floods, and tornadoes, but it has been built specifically to withstand a much more catastrophic event than, let's say a typical office building or even a home. And finally, ransomware. We had a client not so long ago that called us in a panic because one of their admins had inadvertently and with the best intentions clicked on an email that had spoofed, and claimed to be from that firm's IT department testing security. What she did was download and install malware that encrypted with CryptoLocker their entire environment. What that actually did was prevented them from accessing any of their information. This was in the private cloud, by the way. They called us in a panic. We were able to restore their last good backup, which was half an hour old at that point. So within an hour, every single workstation, and understand these are virtual desktops, every single one of those was to the last good moment before that malware infection had happened. So in essence, the private cloud not only does it help you, with the management, but should somebody invite or accidentally create or compromise the security, we are able to go to our servers in those data centers and restore the last good backup. The advantage there is, well, I mean, it's pretty obvious, but they didn't pay the ransom. They weren't put on a list of individuals who, were exploited once and perhaps will be on a short list to be exploited again. Instead, their business was back up and running as if it had never happened. And it also brings up a good, maybe a good, some practical advice I would offer to anyone, really, private cloud or otherwise. But having those types of trainings, understand that, the human element is often the weakest link in the security chain. And best intentions, it's rare that it's actual malfeasance, somebody like out to to compromise, or an outside hack. Most of the time it's accidental, or it's somebody was duped into sharing their information. Once that's happened, then it gives access to the environment. So training on that is part of what I think what a good vendor does, both in providing whether on-site maintenance and IT, or a private cloud vendor. That is something that you should request and demand, really, as part of your transition to the cloud, because creating consistent protocols, making sure your staff knows what to do, and maybe even more importantly, what not to do, and how to be kind of aware. Those are things that are extremely important, and we work with our clients all the time, because the benefits of that is important, really, period. Even throughout your entire life, but let's say specifically to the business of a law firm, making sure that your staff knows what to do, what not to do. Those are the things that help you stay in business, you protect your data, and your staff, is confident that what they're using, that the tools, whether it be private cloud or otherwise, just the tools they have are being leveraged to gain efficiencies and really make sure that clients are being represented in the most positive way.